Evening, everyone, and we want to welcome you to our Power Podcast All-Star Live Stream Series. I'm your co-host, Brother Bedford, and once again, we want to thank you for sharing with us your valuable time on these evenings, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. You've been real troopers hanging with us throughout the entire series that we've had. We still got more to go. Many of you have been emailing, talking about how you're thoroughly enjoying these podcasts, these live streams. They've been educational, they've been informative, they've been inspirational and motivational, and in a lot of cases, they've been very entertaining as well. So we thank you for all of the feedback that you've been giving us. What I need you to do right now is go ahead in that section below, in the comment section. I need you to go ahead, just tell us your name and where you're from. We've been getting people who've been chiming in from London, the UK, South Africa, Barbados. I mean, we've had people from all over Canada. We have a nice contingent that's always joining us every week from Canada. So we want to say thank you for joining us up there. Again, thank you so much. So go ahead and type in your name, where you're from. What I need you to also do is go ahead and love the page, like the page, follow the page. Therefore, you get all of the notifications from George C. Fraser, what he's up to, special broadcast that's coming up, all of the provocative memes that he puts up that gets us thinking deeply about certain subject matter. So we need you to do that. The other way that you'll get notified about upcoming podcasts, and of course also the past podcasts, is to go to www.newblackpower.com, www.newblackpower.com. And what you're going to have to do is, once you enter your name and email, make sure that you check your email and the spam filter and make sure that you confirm. Therefore, you'll receive all of the information from me. If you don't confirm, you won't get the updates. And then, because we don't spam, and you'll wonder why you're not getting the updates and the notifications. And it's simply because you did not confirm. The last thing I need you to do is share this. Go ahead and tell everyone that we're live and in living color right now with Dr. George C. Fraser and Ron Daniels, another icon walking, a living legend. And so we want to make sure that you get all of this information. So just make sure that you do that. Share this right now in all of the Facebook groups, all of your pages. Let them know that we're live with Dr. George C. Fraser and Dr. Ron Daniels. Now, before I turn it over into the hands of our host, Dr. George Fraser, I just want to say one thing about a point that we were making. I think tonight really speaks to the point that we were making in our last conversation about leadership. And we talked about maybe people believing that there's a void in leadership. I don't necessarily believe that there's a void in leadership. I believe that there's a void of us connecting with leadership, because we have tons of brothers and sisters who've been in this work for a very long time, and they've been leading. They have the scars to prove it. They have the ups and downs, the financial hardships to prove it. But in today's society, most people view leadership by you having a hit record. So you're a leader, or you're a sports figure, so you're a leader. But we have brothers and sisters who've been teaching and training and leading our people for many, many, many years. And so with that said, what I want to do is to turn you over into the hands of one who I consider one of our leaders for the past 40 years in helping us with our conversation of networking and building effective relationships and taking ourselves to the next level with our economic and our financial literacy, none other than Dr. George C. Fraser.
Thank you, Brother Bedford. We're waiting for our guest, Dr. Ron Daniels. I know he was trying to get on. I saw him. Was there something that we needed to do? He was trying to get on, but anyway, he'll get on. I know he's poised to be with us. I'm really excited. I've had a long friendship with this public intellectual. He is one of the great thinkers, one of the great doers, one of the great activists amongst our people, not only in America, but in the Pan-African diaspora. I truly enjoy being in his presence. We spent 2 weeks together in November, traveling to Senegal, Ghana, and South Africa with none other than the Dr. Julius Garvey. And what a time we had. We had some quality time to spend together and to unpack some really gnarly and difficult issues that remain in the context of Black people, not only in America, but globally. So what I'm going to do, I know he's trying to get on, and I see his square down there, but I don't see his picture. So while he figures it out, and I'm sure he will, he's done many Zoom calls. Uh, I'm going to give him the proper introduction, as I do all of our guests, and not just try to wing it. All of our guests I have close personal friendships with. That's why they're guests. Mad respect for all of them. They all have expertise in different areas. And Ron is right up there at the top. He is the Secretary of State of Fraser Nation. He's one of the founding members of Fraser Nation. And what can I say about the brother? You'll meet him. We'll talk. We'll have a very rich, very deep talk. Is a brother with the age and the experience and the wisdom to successfully tackle some of the great issues of our time, to include things like reparations in the Black family and so many others. You'll learn about that in his introduction. So let me just do a formal introduction. Um, Veteran social and political activist Dr. Ron Daniels was an independent candidate for President of the United States in 1992. He served as executive director of the National Rainbow Coalition in 1987 and the Southern Regional Coordinator and deputy campaign manager for Jesse Jackson for President campaign in 1988. He holds a BA in history from Youngstown State University, right up the block from me here in Cleveland, Ohio, a master's in political science from Rockefeller School of Public Affairs at Albany, in Albany, New York, and a doctorate of philosophy in Africana Studies from the Union Institute and University in Cincinnati. Dr. Daniels is a distinguished lecturer and emeritus at York College, the City University of New York, where he taught courses in political science. From 1993 to 2005, Dr. Daniels served as the first African American executive director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, CCR. During his tenure at CCR, he emerged as a major force in fighting against police brutality and misconduct, church burnings, hate crimes, voter disenfranchisement, environmental racism, and the threats to civil liberties posed by the government's response to 9/11 terrorist attacks. In June of 1995, Dr. Daniels led an African American fact-finding and support delegation and mission to Haiti. As a result of the visit, the Haiti Support Project was created to mobilize ongoing political and material support for the struggle for democracy and development in Haiti. The HSP Project has emerged as the leading African American organization working to build a constituency for Haiti in the United States. A prolific essayist and commentator, Dr. Daniels' column Vantage Point appears in numerous Black and progressive newspapers and websites nationally. He's also the host of a weekly issue-oriented public affairs talk show on WBAL 99.5 FM on the Pacifica Network in New York. And until recently, he served as an occasional guest host for Make It Plain with Mark Thompson on Sirius XM Radio. He is author of Still on This Journey, The Vision and Mission of Dr. Ron Daniels. This is the book. This is a picture of Dr. Daniels when he was running for the presidency and other pictures. It's a wonderful book of his incredible essays. Dr. Daniels is founder and president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, IBW, a progressive African-centered, action-oriented resource center dedicated to empowering people of African descent and marginalized communities. As the administrator for the National African American Reparations Committee, NAARC, IBW has emerged as a leading organization within the United States and global reparations movement. NAARC has devised a 10-point reparations program and is a staunch supporter of the H.R. 40, the congressional bill that would establish a national commission to study reparations proposals for African Americans. Dr. Daniels serves as the convener of the NAARC. Finally, in 2019, Dr. Daniels was honored to be designated a founding member of Fraser Nation, and under the leadership of myself, and to be appointed our Secretary of State for this emerging virtual nation. That is Dr. Ron Daniels. Here is a little matrix, if you will, little diagram of the Institute of the Black World and the intellectual rigor and thinking that goes into all the things that is the Institute of the Black World. And their theme is cultivating a culture of collaboration to empower and heal Black families and communities. So at the center is Dr. Daniels, who is a progressive African-centered, action-oriented facilitator and convener and a resource center. He heads that resource center. They are tackling racial justice collaboratives, the Black Family Summit, the Haiti Support Project, the State of the Black World Conferences, Pan-African Unity Dialogue, and some of the special projects and initiatives that he is juggling and currently working on include Police Reform and Accountability Task Force, the Newark Model City and Marshall Plan Initiative in Newark, New Jersey, the national and international symposiums on the future of Africa and the Caribbean, the National African American Reparations Committee, as I mentioned earlier, and finally, the cross-generational dialogue engagement. So as you can see, he has his hands full. Now I see his name up there. You see his name up there, Brother Bedford?
Yes.
And I don't understand why there is.
Dr. Daniels did just message and he said that he was having difficulty with the camera, but are you there, Dr. Daniels? Is your audio working?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I apologize. I'm relatively new to the Zoom world, but this is the first time I've had this problem. It's indicating that I need to adjust my camera settings. We do have two Zoom accounts. One is personal, Dr. Ron Daniels, one is IBW. And so I don't have a clue why it is not allowing me to start my camera. It's just simply telling me that cannot start video, failed the video camera, please select another video camera in settings. I only have one camera, so I don't.
Is the camera on your laptop, Dr. Daniels, or is it an attached camera? I have an attached camera.
No, it's an attached camera. It's on my computer, and it's, I've done a whole bunch of these lately, and it's never ever failed. So I don't.
Okay, so this is a camera in addition to the one that is already built into your computer.
There's no camera built into my desktop.
Oh, I see.
I have a camera that's attached to it, and I only have one, and that's the one that I'm clicking, and I don't know why it is not. I've just had a Zoom meeting this afternoon, so I don't know why it's not allowing me to, allow me to engage with my dear beloved friend, Dr. George Fraser. So I don't know what,
Now
what.
you've looked down on the bottom of the screen, because sometimes it says on the bottom of the screen, share video. And if there's a line through it, that means it's not. If you hit that button, the
Well, no,
line,
I should be hitting start, excuse me, start, just like I can mute. I'm unmuted now.
Mhm.
And then typically what I do is just click this start video. And for some
Right.
inexplicable reason, it is simply not doing what it has done. And since I'm a Neanderthal by admission, that's being drug into the 21st century, I am at a loss as to what to do. I don't know why
Okay.
it is
Let's,
blocking me.
Dr. Daniels, let's try this real quick, and then I guess, George, we can go on with it. But right next to the camera, there should be an arrow.
Yep,
Did you hit that? And it should unfold, and it should say settings,
it does say settings.
video settings, and you should be able to click that, and then it should give you the information as to which camera is connected or not.
Yeah, it is. It is. I only have one. So when
Does it say that it's connected?
it just, when I click down, I click camera, I click it, and I don't know where it would say. There's a video icon there. And there's a series of things that I read going down the line.
Like audio, share screen, chat, those things?
Yep, all of those things.
So do you see yourself in the window?
No, I don't.
And right up under it should say camera.
It does say camera.
Does it have your camera selected right there?
As best I know, I mean,
Click the little arrow right next to it and see if there's a drop down that kind of has your camera name highlighted.
it's there. It is highlighted. Yeah, it is highlighted.
And okay, so then when it says meetings, is there a check in the box that says always show video preview?
No, I don't see that language. Wait a minute, there's one that says always show video preload. Yeah, that's checked.
Okay, so Dr. Daniels, we know that it is not a pilot error, okay?
Right.
You're flying the plane with everything you have, right? It's a technical error,
Right.
It's
right? And we know that these things are not always perfect. So we'll just have to go with audio tonight, and people can't see the handsome face that we posted all over social media when promoting Dr. Ron Daniels tonight.
That's terrible too, because I got dressed up for you, the amazing George Fraser. You know I had to try to look nice. Got a nice little virtual background and everything all lined up.
Oh my God. Right. Oh my God. Well, we don't have you on this podcast tonight for your beauty. We have you for your brains, which is critically important to people in the Pan-African world. I read verbatim your short bio. Thank God you sent me the short one. I'd still be, introducing you. And so people have a really good idea of who Dr. Ron Daniels is. I also showed them the chart that you had emailed me that indicates all of the projects and initiatives that the Institute of the Black World has been invested in and involved in for many, many years. You also have the distinguished title as elder, and I feel wonderful at 75 years old as an elder. You are my senior, right?
That's right.
You are a regular at the Power Networking Conference and our town hall meetings. You do our incredible libations at the opening on Thursday at the Power Networking Conference. Or those who have been there, the many who have been there, know exactly what you look like. if anyone's really curious, all you have to do is go to Google and put in his name, and there's at least 100 pictures of him doing all kinds of things around the world. So let's get on with this because the time is moving, and you know, you do a wonderful radio program. You know how quickly an hour can go, right? Especially with someone as rich in experience, wisdom, and knowledge as you are, tackling some of the most gnarly, some of the most complicated issues in the context of our community. What I want to do, when we talked earlier today, um, I said, listen, this is about you. This is not about me. I really want to talk about what you want to talk about, and so after our conversation, I began to write my own little personal list, if you will, of things. I just got it down to four of the four most complex and challenging issues that will progressively move Black people forward into their greatness. And I matched it up with projects and initiatives that you have so generously given your life to. So I may have a surface knowledge of these issues, but you have a very, very deep working knowledge of these issues. The first thing I wrote, and again, this is in no special order, Dr. Daniels, and I want you to unpack this issue as you feel it and know it. And I wrote to myself, really, that a race of people, a society of people cannot prosper without an intact family structure. And we know that there are some very serious issues in the context of Black America in particular, but pretty much all over the diaspora, but most importantly here, of the disruption, the coming apart of the Black family. Unpack that as best as you can on how you see it, and more importantly, what are the solutions? What are the action steps? What can we as Black men and Black women begin to do, and the work that must be done to reconnect, to rebuild the Black family?
Well, well, first of all, I think that family is rooted in, we should see family as rooted within an African worldview. I think we start there. That we must see ourselves, as you often, mention, in relationship to how we start Fraser Nation, within the context of an African value system, an African worldview. And that worldview is based on the sense of mutual sharing, mutual obligations, a connectedness to each other, which is reflected in the Nguzo Sawa. And perhaps the principles which best exemplify that are the principles of Ujima, collective work and responsibility, and Ujamaa, cooperative economics. So I want to put it in that sense because I'm not sure that it is necessarily about biology, though it can be, but it's about the principles that we should be building our families on. And that family can be a nuclear biological family, or it can be an extended family. And in fact, the way I think we see it is that we are all Black people. We are all people of African descent. There should be no motherless children, no fatherless children, because that's the way it was in the African village. And so how do you extrapolate that? Now, certainly we want to have healthy, wholesome families. But I think it's important to say that, many of us, if we can have mother, father together, or quite frankly, in this era, we must also talk about people who are same-sex partners, because what's important is the relationship. What's important is the values that connect people. Some of us were raised by single mothers. Others were raised by single fathers. And so in that context, the question becomes, if there's a single father, if there's a single mother, if there's a same-sex couple who are married, then how do we connect with them? How do we see to it that they have the support within the village that is required to make sure that we sustain ourselves as a healthy, wholesome people? And in that regard, it seems to me that the constant internalization of these values of who we are and what our obligations are to each other is critically important. So if I go back to August Wilson's Hill District, which is one of the places I was raised in, and many of us have these stories, or on Park Avenue, because in my book I talk about a tale of two cities being essentially raised in two steel communities, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Hill District, and Youngstown, Ohio. You all know that's a steel town. But in both of those places, people on the block, they were broken, quote unquote, in the narrow sense. They were broken families on the block at 6 Shipton Street. But what was not broken was a sense of mutual obligation to those children. The person next door might have been running numbers. The one on the other side, might have been, doing moonshine or doing some, those kind of things. Unemployed folks were but one of the things that we all had in common was we looked after each other on that block. The bill collector came around, nobody knew nothing, in terms of, because we had a sense of mutual obligation and responsibility. Beyond that, in that same, if I look at the Hill District, for example, in addition to that, there were supportive institutions, there were community centers, there were churches in the community. And when you went to school, you found teachers who had a primary commitment to raising us collectively as children. So those values were there. So even though it was rough, even though it was tough, even though it was difficult, I remember I talk about Hill City, a community center that was there to just rescue what today we would call at-risk young people, because there was unemployment, there was underemployment, there was poverty, right? But what there was not a paucity of was love, frankly. And the notion that, no, you're not going to commit this infraction over here, young Ron Daniels, because I know your mama, I know your daddy. And before you get home, the word will be there that you have committed an infraction, because we are going to look after you. Now, if you look at our communities today, we don't really have that. You're lucky if you know your next door neighbor in many instances. We've lost that sense of commitment to each other, and we need to restore that. We may not be able to do it in exactly the same way, but it's the values that underlie that. I'll give you one illustration. I wrote something about this one time. So that if you were about to embark on a trip somewhere back in the day, typically what would happen is your mother or your father would call the place where you were going to make sure that you were going where you said you were going to be going. And that was somebody you knew. And so we checked on each other. And there was a sense of safety and security because you knew the person where you were going, right? Well, today, it's, you just go out there. You know what I mean? There is no, and so I wrote a thing called parental networking. Parental networking, right? Mm-hmm. Because the other thing that begins to happen very often is people get into what different children are wearing, the whole issue around peer pressure and so forth. Well, if parents are networked and they're on the same page about whether you're going to get a $160 pair of shoes or not, and whether that's a reasonable kind of proposition, then there is no peer pressure because everybody's on the same page. But equally important in terms of security, I know where you are. You are supposed to be where you said you are. And if you don't show up where you're supposed to be, I'm getting a call from somebody saying, George and Emily and Emma are not here yet. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And we can do that, even if we're not, we can do that through what I call parental networking, having a sense of mutual obligation to our children and so forth. And of course, finally, and I guess, to just undergird it, it is important that we do it from an African-centered framework with a sense of Black consciousness, that we are an African people, we are Black people. And that does not mean just in terms of our skin color, it means a commitment to a set of values and a set of principles.
Let me ask a question. Would or should we redefine the nuclear Black family? Would that be helpful? I don't know how we mitigate or significantly reduce, Doc, the the enormously high out of wedlock birth rate in Black America. I mean, it's high in white America too, higher than it's ever been, but it's the highest among us. How do we, and what has happened that now has actually become the norm? That's the norm. Out of wedlock birth rates are the norm. It is not some aberration. I remember when we were kids, Ron, you know this. If someone on our block, in our community, had a baby out of wedlock, oh no, that was hush hush. They were sent down south, right? It was. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember.
No. There's a lot of stigma was associated with that. Right?
Yes,
right.
Yes, but there is no stigma associated with that at all. Is it because the lack of, let's call it, quality choices that our sisters have, but the urge and the DNA calling to have a child and want a child and but cannot find the right partner because of all the things we know that is occurring with Black men? So would it be helpful to redefine what we call the nuclear Black family? That's one. Well, answer that.
Yeah. First of all, I think we have to now say that there are different ways in which you can configure family. It could be the nuclear family. That's the nuclear family as husband and wife, husband and wife, or
a couple of kids.
And the children, and then of course the extended family of aunts and uncles and so forth and so on. That is the sort of the traditional model. But today we have to frankly add to that same-sex families. We have to. I mean, that's just a reality of where we are. And frankly, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, because I think to the degree that we have stigma and to the degree that we sort of deny that which is there and we exclude, we actually compound the problem. We add trauma to the equation as well. But I think we also have to say that a mother that is raising a child or children, as my mother had to do for a big period of time, that's a legitimate family, as is a father raising a child. That's a legitimate family. The question is, how do we support that family? First of all, if we take the stigma away, that's the first thing. It's not you're not bad because you're a single mom. You're going to take that out of the equation. And then the question is, then how do we support, right? And it seems to me that one of the things I often talk about when I sort of recite my pledge to African people, I talk about we must raise many children for our nation. I point out that means that, therefore, if I am a man in the community and there's a sense for a need for a male child to have a father figure, then I can extend myself to be a father figure to those male children. And it's not a biological thing, and it's not about me getting over with the sister. You see what I'm saying? That's what we have to have. You see, I mean, it's a principle thing. I'm not trying to hit on you. You know what I mean? It's not about that. It is about, this is my duty, right? And similarly with sisters, I mean, they're saying, how do you relate to the female children to some degree? And by the way, as we evolve, we're increasingly coming to see that these roles are, there are some limitations based on maybe biology and strength and so forth, but in a real sense, we're evolving more towards a sense of mutuality in terms of what those roles are, right? And so So that becomes one of the most important things, it seems to me. Now, as it relates to the issue of out of wedlock, therefore, yeah, I think I would still prefer to continue to encourage people to get married. And from my faith tradition, I would prefer that they do that within the context of the sacred blessing of that marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That's my own preference. But I don't want to impose my preference, because that is not the only way that it could be done, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, there's a reason why there was this phrase, what was it called? If you stay with somebody, it was called, what was it called? I forget now, a natural, I forget the term that they used to be recognized. If you stayed with somebody for 7 years or something like that, it was called, it was almost called
Common law.
Common law.
common law marriage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did
Do
that
we
mean?
have a picture of Ron Daniels we could put there, Brother Bedford? Is that, you know how to do that?
That would be difficult at this moment.
Okay.
The reason why that I say that is because at the end of the day, it is the relationship which matters. The relationship that matters. You may have a biological child, which is you're the biological father, but if you don't have a relationship, then I mean, it's just in name only. In my own upbringing, I had a stepfather. His name was Eddie, and he was, and this was he and my mother were never married, but they stayed together. They had a relationship. It was a meaningful relationship, and I looked up to him as really not even my stepfather. The relationship was up. I looked up to him as my father because he related to me in that way, taught me stuff. And he would come and he was an itinerant guy. He'd be gone a week, come back, and he'd come in and, he'd do a little tap dance for us and kick up his heel. And man, we were so happy because he was relating to us. That relationship made him father. It had nothing to do with biology.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have to be, and I don't want to say liberal, but I think we have to extend the principles to say that it is far better to embrace that person who had the child out of wedlock, not to stigmatize, but to embrace, right? Now, let me say something further about that. The other thing that we've vastly lost is the art and science of parenting. The art and science of parenting. So in our community, how do we teach? See, this is the problem I have. We have children raising children.
Right.
I mean, what I mean, it's like Fannie Lou Hamer once said, always remember where we came from and honor the bridges that brought us over. I mean, there are things that brought us over, and they may or may not comport with what the larger Eurocentric society talks about. For example, tough love. I mean, given some of the psychology of Dr. Spock, we should all be traumatized and crazy.
Right.
How many times did our parents tell you, "I'll kill you"? They didn't really mean that. I mean, they use violent language, but they didn't really mean that. And we knew that they didn't really mean that. We knew that they were trying to be protective. They knew that they were trying to keep us from getting into some kind of danger. But going back to our ancient African principles, there are certain things that also that abound. The notion that you have respect for your elders, right? The notion that there's a sense of a road that people have trod that needs to be respected. Now we are into the situation where we have ultra democracy. Everybody has the same rights as the parents have, and so you have to be, you're being guided by them as opposed to giving them guidance. Now there is a body of psychology that says that people like discipline. Children like to know what is right, what is wrong. Now I would trade off some of the more harsh terms. I didn't like that ironing cord. I mean, that I got a couple of times. So I mean, I didn't need all of that, and I would trade some of that off. There are other ways to do some of those things of reward and punishment. That's not necessarily punishment, but is shaping how we ought to relate to each other. So I'm a strong proponent of the notion of teaching how we should parent, how to raise people, how to raise children, and having respect for each other. For example, I mean, it's unheard of that, I mean, you know, I mean, I could rip off a whole bunch of F-bombs and this, that, and the other. I mean, none of us were angels, but it was unheard of us in front of our parents or in front of elders
Right.
to just rip off a bunch of F-bombs like it didn't matter. And to the degree that we have allowed this to happen, you know, with what like life, what is it, art imitating life, you know, I mean, so that, you know, the fact that you went into prison and what's happening in the prison now makes you can sag and all those kind of things. And by the way, that has nothing to do with one's character. I'm not saying that. But just take that one case, for example. I'm looking at you, George Fraser. I mean, you like, even in your casualness, brother, you looking good. You know what I mean? We have we have always prized, if it was the zoot suit, we've always been bodacious. We've always looked to be sharp. Now, sometimes it was exotic, but it was never sloppy. Never, ever was sloppy in. Never. You know, you jack your pants up real high, standing on the corner with your pants jacked up. You know what I mean? And so always sharp. Now, all of a sudden, people went to prison, and then it became life imitating or whatever. I'm flipping it around. I mean, all of a sudden, you know, some people are coming out sagging because that's what you did in the prison. You were sagging, and then you're dragging your feet and that kind of stuff. And so I don't think that we condemn our brothers and sisters and do that, but we have to teach. That's not who we are. You know, we've never ever been a pair of people who have prized sloppy. It's always been artful. It's always been classy. Even when we slam dunk, you understand, it's never a straightforward. I mean, you can't do no sloppy dunk. You got to add some art up in there. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's got to be classy.
Some swag.
Got to be some swag up in there. That's who we are, right?
Right.
So I think all of those things suggest to me that it's really about how we reclaim ourselves. But more importantly, more fundamentally important, is we have to be parents. We have to still provide guidance. And, you know, it is good if you set the example and you don't curse around the young people. But, you know, back in our day, it was don't do as I do as I say do. Now, that may have not have been democratic and all of that, but we didn't say my mother never said it was a democracy. You know what I mean? I came home from school one day and I'm showing off my little knowledge. And my mother said, you know, well, this is a square. I said, no, mama, that's a rectangle. Backhand lick up beside me. Boom. Coming here showing off on me. You know, I mean, don't be coming here showing off your little knowledge on me. You know, and she was making a point. You know, she was making a point. And then, you know, I mean, we were allowed to tune in on the conversations. We overheard what the old folks were saying or what the people were saying, but we knew it was not our place to be involved in those conversations. And so I think going back and looking at, and that's what the Nguzo Sabo is, by the way, in some ways. What Karinga brilliantly put together, the Nguzo Sabo, based on Kauai, the principles of doctrine, the doctrine of tradition and reason. That is to say, this is how we did it traditionally. How would we update that now in terms of real life, rationally? And so this whole notion, that's why, by the way, Quad David Whitaker is one of the leading people in doing what? Rites of passage. What does rites of passage do? It teaches you how to be a woman or a man in a African sense. All right. How do you become and it's not about denigrating you. It's not about making you less than a human being. It means that you grow to be healthy and wholesome. You respect people. You respect yourself. You understand who you are. You know what your lineage and your heritage is. And therefore you do stand up with pride, and you treat everybody with dignity. Because if you don't think you're anybody, and that's one of the negative things that came out of our experience, that constantly tell us that we weren't stuff, you know what the word was, you ain't. That was negative. And so, you know, and so if you ain't nothing, then you will treat other people as if you're not nothing. So I'm saying all of that, and perhaps in a way that is far too verbose.
Yeah.
To simply say that anchoring ourselves in our institutions in rational ways in which we come to be, we see ourselves as whole. And let me just be elongated a little bit more. That applies, for example, to the war on drugs. Look at all the brothers and sisters who are returning from prisons.
Right.
How do we see them? And that's an important question because we got to reintegrate them into our community.
And how do we utilize them? I mean, that's not only how we see them, but how do we utilize them? How do we leverage all of that mind power, you know, and
Which is important because
desire to do something.
yeah, and that's important because if you only see Malcolm as a thug and a hoodlum, as opposed to being a product to some degree of his conditions, and that doesn't mean that you condone what happened. That's not the point. The point is to also understand, however, within a racist, white supremacist society in which we have always been, marginalized and indeed criminalized and often driven to illicit behavior, which we don't condone. But on the other hand, there's a sense of understanding a process of restorative justice, of coming back into the community, which means that you don't just come back. It means you come back understanding that you did harm. You confess that you did harm, right? But you're brought back into the community to make the community whole again. Because we literally got, and by the way, under this system, we got a whole lot of people who went to jail who had no business going to jail in the first place. They didn't do nothing, but they now have the badge of a criminal, the badge of a convict, and we cannot allow ourselves as African people to extend that. We have to have a way of reintegrating them and bringing them back into the village. And it doesn't mean you just bring them back into the village carte blanche, but you bring them back, reintegrate them into the village in a way that makes our community whole again.
2 points. The whole notion of getting back to the tradition of marriage, critically important, because it gives your child, if it's a male, a model for what a man should be. It gives your daughter a model of what a man should be. It gives your son, if you have one, a model of what a good woman should be. Marriage, the unity of marriage, which is really divined by God. This is how it should be, the male-female energy. So that idea, Doc, very, very important idea. And finally, as you know, on this point, at the Power Networking Conference for years, there were 5 things we asked Black people when they left the conference that they considered working on the moment they got home, or doing, or making a commitment to do. And it's right to your point, and that is to save one Black child other than your own. Right now, if you're not doing right by your own children, you're out of that equation. But if you're doing right by your own children, you got a little something in terms of time, in terms of talent, and some treasure. Save one Black child, and it simply means get that child, help that child to get through at least high school. All right, high school. If you get them through high school with a high school diploma, we didn't say college, get them through in and out of high school with a diploma, model some values that will stick with them like sweet potato pie, you will lay the foundation for the rest of their life. Save one Black child other than your own. Next subject. One of the big problems I've been preaching and evangelizing for as long as you've known me is our state of disconnectedness. That we are not so much dispersed as we are disconnected. That Black people have every single thing they need to succeed except each other. Jews have each other, East Indians have each other, Asians have each other, Arabs have each other. We need each other. You have, on a regular basis, a significant part of the Institute of the Black World is the Pan-African Unity Dialogue. And the conversations we had when we were touring Africa together last November with Reverend Dillon, you spoke powerfully about that at the Pan-African Parliament. Talk about how you see the state of disconnectedness and what must occur over the next decade or generation.
Well, let me just say that in general, there's let's start at a sort of micro level to say that, um, and what I use is the parable of the dry bones, and I think it's Ezekiel 37, because what we have is even in our communities, almost across, and the Institute of the Black World 21st Century really evolved out of this idea that we as people of African descent, as Black people, can be in the same community with different people or people doing the same thing, not in conversation with each other. I mean, so one of the things that the Pan-African Unity Dialogue is predicated upon is, can we practice Pan-Africanism right here in Cleveland? Can we practice it in New York? Because in New York, you have Nigeria. And well, you know, we're doing the Power Networking Conference in Houston. There are now more than 50,000 Nigerians in Houston now.
Right.
You know, maybe another 20, 30,000 in Dallas and so forth. But there may be no relationship between them at all. I mean, this is just, you know, that we're occupying the same space. And so before sort of just teasing that out a little bit more, one of the things that we do, and you talked about it with the chart, is cultivating, we talk about cultivating a culture of collaboration to heal Black family, heal and empower Black families, communities, and we also say nations. So that in Cleveland, if there are 5 organizations doing voter registration, why aren't they in conversation with each other? Mm-hmm. If there are 2 or 3 organizations doing criminal justice work, why aren't they not learning from each other? Because what that might suggest is some ability to do specialization, division of labor, complementary relationships, so we maximize the potential of our community. What we tend to do is everybody is doing everything if they're doing anything, because some people ain't doing nothing. Some people are just existing, and we need to activate them. So when we look at the different things that we're doing, whether it is the Pan-African Unity Dialogue, whether we have these drug policy and criminal justice reform collaboratives, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., where people afflicted by the war on drugs, everybody's fighting criminal justice and doing police revenge, and people ain't even talking to each other. So what we do is say, no, can we at least like meet 4 times a year? I mean, do you think that might be valuable? Do you think that knowledge is power and sharing it might have some benefit? Because you better bet that those of whom we are up against, they may not even like each other, but they are plotting and planning our future and what is going to happen to us while we're just moving, we're just struggling instead of struggling intelligently. And so we've done that. We put these structures together, like the Black Family Summit, the Black social workers, and the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the administrators in Black child welfare. You know, and by the way, the principle is nobody surrenders sovereignty. Nobody surrenders anything. It's just a way of collectivizing our talent and in the pool of information in a way that allows us to maximize it. Mm-hmm. And so that's who we are. That's what we do. And you do it with Fraser Nation. And by the way, I
want you to talk about that, Doc. I want you to talk about your thoughts as a founding member of the nation. 18 women, 18 men founded this nation. You were the Secretary of State, and you're an elder, part of our panel of elders. Talk about that. I mean, you know, I obviously talk about it, but yeah, and I was comes across as self-serving.
You cut me off. I'm getting ready to segue and give you some props, and then I mean, so I'm about to say, you are the amazing one who has given your life to that proposition, just phrased differently. Success runs in our race for success, and click, and the whole notion of connecting the dots is what you have perennially put out there as a genius that has been on this quest for all of your life. And so the idea here is, you know, with Fraser Nation, which is to say, all right, so we're going to connect the dots. We've been connecting the dots inside of the United States of America, and trying to figure out a way to create wealth, and to create wealth that can be passed on intergenerationally, and to be the number one employers of Black people in our lifetime. I mean, we've been on that quest. The question is, how can we do that if we're fractured? If in fact God has given us the richest continent on the face of the earth, as Du Bois has articulated it, I mean, Africa has everything. And so we need to be connected to the motherland, because as Garvey said, you know, Europe for the Europeans, Asia for the Asians, Africa for the Africans at home and abroad. He didn't mean everybody had to go back there physically, but you needed to make that psychological, cultural journey back to the source, both in terms of getting yourself reconnected with who you are as a person, as an African person, but then the values and principles of that, and then to say, look, we have this gift, gold, diamonds, bauxite, you name it, we have it. And then how do we therefore use those resources in a way as a base for global Black power? And that's what Fraser Nation is moving to do, and moving to do in an incredibly powerful kind of way. And I'm honored to play some small role as having been designated as Secretary of State to help use my history as a Pan-Africanist and for many, many years, and building these kind of relationships to also make sure that they're done correctly. Because the other thing that becomes incredibly important is the concept of Mayat, which is ancient. The concept of righteousness and justice, that's who we're about. We're not about being dictators and brutalizing our people, or exchanging white oppressors for Black oppressors for white oppressors. That's not what we're about. It's always been about how do we develop ourselves. And so we also have to look at that in terms of, you know, it's not about, you know, the Chinese do what the Chinese have to do, and they may do some good stuff. You know, the Indians may do some good stuff, but we cannot rely on the Chinese to do anything else, but first and foremost, be about advancing the interests of Chinese.
Right.
We have to advance the interests of Africans, and there will be some intersectionality about that. And where there is that intersection is there, it has to be on the basis of principle, not you coming in to steal Africa all over again, or to recolonize Africa with the complicity and acceptance of folks who just want to make money. So the values become incredibly important. And one of the things that I can say about Fraser Nation that I also like to reinforce is it always starts from the very beginning with an African-centered perspective. It begins with that grounding that we're not just doing business. We are doing business, and we're doing it from a socially responsible perspective. That's what you've done as our leader, and I'm president, and I'm delighted to be able to serve as your Secretary of State.
Brother Bever's going to look and see if there are any questions, but while he's doing that, I want you to see that an hour is almost up, believe it or not. I want you to give us a 30,000-foot view on the state of reparations. You have spent a significant part of your life invested in that incredibly important initiative.
Right. Well, reparations, first of all, let me just refer people, as a good organizer should, to the IBW website, ibw21.org, ibw21.org.
Right.
Simply because you'll see an incredible assembly of resources there, not the least of which is a reparations resource center, which is the most extensive online reparations resource center in the world, right there on the IBW website. The state of reparations is, as a patient of Queen Mother Audley Moore. Queen Mother was one of the significant figures in the history of the reparations movement. Gary Convention, 1972. If you see the film, it's Nation Time. She's in the hallway. Get your reparations. Get your reparations. Get your reparations. I say a patient because she used to say that she was a brain surgeon, and her job was to operate on constipated minds, and mine was one of them. And thank God she operated on my mind, and it was hopefully reasonably successful. Because I was a Negro. She said, no, not never shall you grow, you know, in terms of Black, to become an African person, to become a Black person, and to advocate for reparations, which simply means the restitution and repair of the harm which is inflicted in terms of physical, spiritual, or cultural damage to a people. And it's not unprecedented. You know, the greatest case or the most renowned case is that of the Jews in the Holocaust having been paid restitution and compensation. So what's happening, and the Japanese in this society, you know, some $20,000 plus for those who were interned, a shameful internment of citizens here in these United States. And so we're demanding reparations for enslavement. Our free labor built this country without fear of contradiction. But we were brutalized. Our families we were reduced to property. We were like, as Malcolm said, like a chicken, a cow, or a horse, right? And we owe it to our ancestors to, if we never ever got reparations, the reparations is in the struggle to repair the damage done to our psychology because of what happened to us. But beyond that, we are on the brink because of the long historical work of so many people for so many years. HR 40, the bill that would create a commission, not to study whether reparations are due, but to study reparations proposals for African Americans. That is to say, how it will be done is on the brink of being passed in the House of Representatives. And when we have an orange crush that takes place in the upcoming election, and, you know, I believe in magic too. Mystically and magically, the orange man disappears, and the Senate of the United States is now in the right hands. That bill will pass. It now has 120 sponsors in the House of Representatives, more than ever before. Up to 150 is in sight, and it's going to be introduced. It will be passed the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi is in support of it. Chuck Schumer's in support of it. There's been a companion bill introduced in the Senate of the United States of America by Cory Booker, has 11 sponsors. It ain't just Black people. It's progressive whites, it's Latinos, it's Asians. I mean, reparations is surging because people are recognizing that one of the original sins, the dispossession of Native Americans and the stealing of their land and African enslavement, that this nation, there can be no more perfect union until reparations is paid to Africans in America. And we're on the brink of seeing that in our lifetime.
Brother Bedford, did you have a question, or was there some burning questions we needed to cover? We're down to the last.
Well, yeah, first I just want to say thank you, Dr. Daniels, for being with us. And you really touched on a whole bunch of things. You literally just went across the surface of probably 10 different questions that we could possibly ask you to further unpack. But what I'll do, again, I think we definitely need to have you back at another time. But Linda Clemens did want you to expound a little bit more on your thoughts on how Blacks can respond to how they're being treated by the Chinese during this COVID-19 situation, since that has been a bubbling topic since the outbreak, is how we have been treated by the Chinese in Africa and actually in China in certain places. She would like for you to expound on that. And then just another question that I would probably ask you to kind of add to that, and probably as a precursor, is to explain what is Pan-Africanism. I think there's a language barrier with a lot of the youth that we're trying to reach. Some of these terms they've never heard before. And so how can we kind of explain this to them so that they can begin to connect the dots on some of the issues that we're talking about?
Let's start with the definition of Pan-Africanism first, which is in its most basic form, is to say that all people of African descent throughout the world ought to be united behind a common purpose, that we should be working together. I mean, that's all. Pan means all. Africa, it's so if you talk about Pan-Arabism, it means that the Arabs are working together. So Pan-Africanism, and by the way, Pan-Africanism did not emerge in Africa. It actually emerged in the United States of America because we were ripped up from our homeland, and there was a yearning to reconnect and to find a psychological place, because we were in a hostile land. It's like Malcolm said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. And so Pan-Africanism grew up. William Sylvester Williams, W.E.B. Du Bois, people like that. Bishop Henry McNeil Turney, and of course the greatest Pan-Africanism of all, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So, and then you get into nuances and subtleties, because you get beyond just skin color to talk about substantive Pan-Africanism in terms of it's not just about uniting with any person. It's about the values that we should undergird that Pan-Africanism. Now, as it relates to the way the Chinese are treating us, first thing I want to say is, I often sort of, with my Marxist-Leninist brothers and sisters and Maoist brothers, they always talk about, if we only got rid of capitalism, we get rid of racism, right? But that's not true. And China is doing what it's doing. But I also have to say this clearly, in the broad scheme of things, we have contradictions with China, and we've had contradiction with other folks. But the Chinese actually have been generally very supportive of African liberation in ways that certainly the United States of America has not. But what that does not mean, therefore, is that they don't have biases, that they don't have prejudices that have, in fact, in large measure, been imported from the United States. And so we saw this recently inside of China itself. You saw African diplomats initially being treated in a very bad way, and in terms of the African diaspora, and they protested against that. And of course, we have pushed back against that, and we should push back against it, saying that this behavior is not tolerable. This behavior is not certainly conducive to building a long-term constructive principal relationship. And we need to speak with a united voice. Dr. Ira Carruthers of the Samuel D. Wood Proctor Conference, has aggregated a number of leaders with a petition that has been signed on by lots of people, urging the African Union to take a strong and forceful position about this. Why is that important? Because he or she who pays the piper picks the tune. China is all up in Africa. China all up in the United States of America. The mask, some of the materials that are needed for the testing we are finding now is coming from China, right? And so that becomes a delicate thing when you have a certain dependency. But even if you are dependent, or you have to stand up on the basis of principle. So we've urged the African Union to represent Black people, to stand tall. The president of Ghana and a number of other presidents have stood up and said, we appreciate the relationship we have, but you will not treat our people this way. And I think that, and that's how it's being resolved. I think that we'll continue to have this relationship with China. Inside of that relationship, however, we got to continue to discuss with them certain key things, because Chinese, they come and build a road, but they insist that the road is built with Chinese labor. No, that can't happen.
Dr. Daniels, just an add on to that, because you sparked a thought real quick. So then what do you think should be our role as Blacks in America to kind of make sure that there's a louder voice to make sure that reciprocation with the treatment from China, and then them obviously doing some investment there, but what is it that we can do from America to make that sound more, how can I say it, loudly, I guess, to give it a very robust yell that we should not be treated this way?
Well, I think the Congressional Black Caucus is doing that. I think that the Samuel D. Wood Proctor Conference is based here. It is, Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes is the chairman of the board of the Samuel D. Wood Proctor Conference. So that's a pretty influential voice out there. So they've been aggregating not only faith leaders, but they have put together a petition that literally thousands, hundreds of people, if not thousands, have signed on to. And so that message is being delivered, and it is being heard. I don't know what the latest state is, but I think there may have even been an official apology that may have been issued. I'd have to track that a little bit more closely, but certainly that is how it's going to be resolved, and at least in the short term. But then we still have to monitor the relationship in the long term. The one thing that we should not do, however, is turn around and therefore go down to Chinatown in New York and start slapping Chinese upside the head because the government of China, I mean, we don't want to get into that kind of xenophobic behavior. They don't represent the government. That is not, that's not even the people of China themselves are not necessarily the people who are perpetrating this. But we also have to be on our guard always about the stereotypes, the myths that circulate throughout the world that have come from this racist society that have permeated all over the world. I remember some of our men who went off to war in World War II, and the story is that they would go to Europe, and people would ask would you show us your tail? Mm. I mean, so I'm saying that they had spread that Black people had tails, right. And so that emanates from this racist society here. So I think our voices are being amplified. They are being heard. And, I mean, at Fraser Nation, we can also take a further position on it as well. But I think also equally important is building sound economic relationships with China so that we're not giving the continent away. That if you want the resources, you need the resources. First of all, we got leverage. You need the resources. And if you want these resources, then it has to be on our terms, not on your terms, on what our president calls interdependency, not dependency. And also some principles that make sure that we benefit. And it certainly should not be the case that your labor is coming and while we have unemployment. And also, by the way, if you're gonna hang out over here and you decide that you're gonna, you cannot also come and father children and then leave them and not own them. Mm. You can't do that either. And then the other thing, by the way, and this gets back to it, in our societies, therefore, we cannot also stigmatize those children if they're left behind. We still have to embrace them. So on the African continent, that's becoming a problem because there's still certain levels of tradition that say, well, wait a minute, it's like they're out of wedlock. It's out of the race thing that happened and you with the Chinese. And then the children are punished and they should not be. So that's another kind of thing. But we should be demanding of China, look, I mean, your workers, you have an obligation to support these families, these children that you have birthed. You have an obligation as human beings, human being to human being, to make sure that they are supported.
Awesome. Dr. Daniels, you are the intellectual think tank for our nation. The Institute of the Black World is the intellectual think tank for Fraser Nation. How can people connect with the Institute of the Black World? What do you have on the agenda that you need for us to support? And give us your website again.
Well, yeah, our website is ibw21.org. And again, ibw21.org. You can connect with us at info@ibw21.org, info@ibw21.org. And yeah, I'm still old school. I think some people still like to call. So you can also, we have a phone number if you want to reach out and touch us. You can call 718-429-1415. 718-429-1415. And you'll get an answer machine, but we'll get back to you at some point because we're a very small organization that largely functions on uncompensated labor in many respects. Now, what we're working on, the State of the Black World Conference, you've been at every State of the Black World Conference that we've ever held. We do them every 4 years after the election, a presidential election, to assess the impact of the presidential election on Black America and the Pan-African world. Now we're assessing the impact of the presidential election the most consequential election in our lifetime, barring none.
I know we say that every 4 years, but this really is.
I mean,
Right? This
there's no
really
question
is.
about that.
This
Absolutely no
really
question
is.
about it. And we
Right.
have to also assess the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, given the state of where we are, it looks like instead of November after the election having the full conference, we're going to defer it or reschedule it until April of 2021. But we will have the town hall meeting, a virtual town hall, or it may be in person. We got to wait and see. But if all else fails, we will assess the impact of the election. And the Honorable Raj J. Baraka, Mayor of Newark, New Jersey, is hosting us. We've been focusing on Newark deliberately because he is arguably one of the most progressive, one of the 2 or 3 most progressive mayors in Black America today. So that's what we're working on. And of course, we're also working very strongly on something. We have an initiative called the Coronavirus Emergency Response Initiative, in which our Black Family Summit, which consists of healing organizations, some of which I've enumerated, we're establishing, piloting in New York, a listening line. It's called the Community Cares Listening Line. And it's for our first responders and essential workers. Because over and over again, I saw some data somewhere today. I'm telling you what city it was. 2/3 of the first responders were Black people, either from the Caribbean, from Africa, or African American. 2/3 on the front lines, at risk, because they're interfacing with these patients and whatnot. But also, and not just the first responders, it's who's cooking the food, who's mopping the floors, who's bringing the food in and out, who's driving the buses, who are the grocery store, the supermarket clerks. You see what I'm saying? When you look at that on the margins, the vast majority of these people are Black and brown folk, who are doing this work. So it's traumatic, man. And I'm traumatized and I ain't there. I mean, just looking at it. Imagine if you are actually in one of those hospitals having to see those bodies piled up and having to do that work. So what this Community Cares Listeners Line will do is it will have a trained ear to listen if you feel anxious, if you want to just talk. And what we're finding is, based on marketing surveys, there was an article about this in the New York Times last week. People were just taking a poll, pollsters. Well, if you take the poll at all, you do it. You want to hurry up, get and answer the question and be gone. But the pollsters we're finding is the people who were answering the questions wanted to continue to talk. They wanted to continue to talk. They wanted to talk about their experience. They wanted to talk about their families. They wanted to talk about how it was impacting them. So the Community Cares Listeners Line will provide that service. And then it will not provide counseling. But if you need counseling, and one of the persons who's a strong supporter of Fraser Nation and our president knows is Dr. Patricia Newton. She's a trained psychiatrist. She's the president and CEO of the Black Psychiatrists of America. We have psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, where you can get culturally appropriate counseling. But then if it's domestic abuse, if it's alcoholism, if it's drug addiction, we will also refer you to those services as well. So that's something that we are piloting in New York. And once we feel within 6 months, we will extend it to Washington, D.C., Chicago, New Orleans, Atlanta. We're gonna be stretching it out in several cities because there's such a huge demand, because people want to talk, they want to share, and we want to be able to them to unload that anxiety, that fear, that trauma that they're experiencing. So that's one of the major things that we're working on now.
Dr. Daniels, I love you, man. I don't know what we would do without you. I don't know what we would do without you. You've committed your whole life to the investment and upliftment of Black people. We know that our people want progress without execution. You execute, execute, execute. You have a lifetime of execution. You have a book to prove it. And you're highly decorated. You're deeply loved. We are fortunate to have you this long and hopefully longer. I'm saddened that we cannot see your handsome face tonight because that would add.
We're
That
gonna
would
correct this
add,
as soon as I get off this phone. I'm calling my web guy and say, man, what happened? Then you got to correct this because I
right.
mean I'm feeling terrible that we weren't able to do this right. But
Tone and comportment and body language, as we've learned from the great Linda Clemens, is so important in communication. But even without that, even with just a blank page staring at us and the words Dr. Ron Daniels, you were powerful and you made an impact and you informed. And we deeply appreciate you for that, deeply. Brother Bedford, thank you for your masterful hosting as usual. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And then, brothers and sisters, as you know, at the end, someone was trying to call me. At the end of each of these, we offer a special Power Networking Conference deal. This deal is in honor of Dr. Ron Daniels. 5 people only, 5 people only. So those of you that I did not get back to because you're over the 5 last time, all your emails are timestamped. The offer is available again to 5 people only. It's for the Power Networking Conference, October 14th through the 17th in Houston, Texas. That's where we'll be, at the beautiful Hilton of Americas. That's where we'll be, with the baddest menu of brilliant minds that look like you and I. All right, we come in all shades, skin tones, and hair textures. Don't get it twisted, right? Dr. Daniels will be back with us again. Dr. Julius Garvey will be with us. I think I mentioned that to you. We will be giving him the first International Marcus Mosiah Garvey Award. It's a special award, and it will be given to him, the son, not the grandson. Someone made a mistake and said that the last time we did this, but the son of Marcus Garvey. Brother Bedford, who's up on Thursday? Did you mention that?
Trevor Otts is up this Thursday.
Oh, the Trevor Otts.
Trevor Otts is up this Thursday.
The internet social media tech guru of the world, right? And had he been with us tonight, he probably could have solved Dr. Daniels' problem, right?
Quickly.
Got it like that, right? So anyway, so the offer for the conference, as you know, an adult registration is $1,500. We want you to bring a student 17 to 25. So that's an $800 registration fee for a student. We put the 2 together for you. 1 student, 1 adult. We take $1,900 off. We make that package available to you for $399. It costs us more than that to feed you at the Power Networking Conference, where you can meet up close and personal Dr. Ron Daniels, right? He is a legend in his own time. He really is. You want to meet him and you want to get his autograph. He's going to do a book signing. Here's his book, this beautiful book. He's going to do a book signing, and he'll sign the book for you. So $399, just email me at gfraser@frasernet.com, gfraser@frasernet.com, F-R-A-S is in Sam, E-R @frasernet.com. Say I'm in the subject matter, put your full name and your cell number in the body of the email. The first 5 get that special offer. That's our story tonight. We're sticking to it. We gave Dr. Ron Daniels, in spite of the fact that we did not have a picture, a living live picture of this beautiful servant leader. We're going to have him back. It's just not enough time. He's got over 1 million published words. So again, Dr. Daniels, thank you. We love you, man. We'll figure it out the next time. I just want to leave with these closing words, brothers and sisters. You were born looking like your parents. You will die looking like your choices. Choose wisely. Good night. Good night, Doc.
Good night.